So, now we've moved on to the bit that I'm really looking forward to, which is the Smart Cities panel discussion. So we're going to bring back some old faces and some new faces. So can I invite Yasha Franklin-Hodge, who you may remember from our opening keynote, CEO of Boston. Deborah Conville. Where's Deborah? Hi, Deborah. Deborah is Smart City Lead Officer in the Belfast City Council. And Dejan Bojic from NEC. Dejan is Director of Smart City Solutions. So unfortunately I was so enthusiastic with filling this panel that I didn't actually leave a chair for myself. So I'm probably going to roam about it a little bit. So just to get things kicked off, yeah, I've got an understanding of what smart cities are. I suspect everybody has a view of what a smart city is. Can I actually ask you, what does a smart city mean to you? Dejan, you're first.
I see it just as a very broad umbrella term, and it's really something that represents the digital transformation of the city. And more we actually hear cities and people actually stop referring to it as a smart city, but actually it's using attributes to define the desired outcome. So you will see references to playable cities, livable cities, resilient cities, economically vibrant cities, all different types of description of what actually is behind strategy and vision to bring in the new technologies into that transformation. And I think the real magic of it is actually when it all comes together. I mean, I think we often talk these days in the realm of modern technology about doing sort of cross-cultural, cross-functional efforts in terms of to deliver real results to the community. And I think smart city is a perfect example of that, because we have to think about societal changes, about economic development, about physical infrastructure of the city, and technology just sits behind all of this and tries to support it as best as possible. So it's a very broad subject, and I think it's really all about being clear about what do we want to achieve out of it with the help of technology, not it being technology for its own sake.
Deborah, what do you think from Belfast's perspective?
Totally agree with Diane that it's a broad term, a bit of a buzzword, but it really seems to be about how we can use technology to design, to implement and deliver citizen-centric services. There are a lot of smart city initiatives being implemented throughout our city, but I think the trick is to try and look at three different things. First of all, understand the physical environment in the city, and to understand and have, I suppose, a good digital infrastructure to support that environment, to connect that environment, and also to understand the behaviours of people and systems within our city. How do we work in the city? How do we visit? What do we do when we visit the city? How do we live in the city? How do we avail of services within the city? And those three are interdependent on each other. And when designing city and citizen services, I think we need to think of those three aspects.
Yeah, well, I won't repeat the excellent points that Deborah and Dejan just made. I think it summarizes very well this focus on what is it we're trying to achieve. It's not just being smart, it's outcomes. But the point I would add is that there's a huge opportunity in breaking down some of the silos that exist inside of government and between the public and private sector when we think about smart cities and the application of technology. So much of government structure is historically defined by what's possible with the tools and the communication methods that exist. But you think about a question, for example, what's the interplay between a transport system and housing development? What's the connection between a public parks network and public health? These are fundamentally important interconnections that historically we haven't had the tools to make those linkages and to start to think about policy that spans across those different areas of government function. And I think some of the technology that's being developed, the data platforms, whether those are open data or closed data systems, suddenly gives us a whole new tool to rethink some of the structural barriers to making those positive outcomes a reality for our constituents.
And what do you think, Cormac?
I think it's in terms of that sort of citizen engagement side of things too, that smart cities just doesn't become the administrators on the inside carrying out analysis, thinking what they think it needs to be. Again, that idea of one individual on the New York side is an example. You know, if you expose that information out there, you give the opportunity that somebody will come up with an idea that will make the city smarter without the 10 individuals sitting in a room in the council who never thought of this. So try and engage with the IT community, just with your city citizens in general, in that, and make it a two-way thing, not just here's what we've done.
I guess we're coming back to that old question that we hear quite a lot these days, which is what's the user need? I mean, what is the user need for a smart city in the context of Boston, Yasha?
Sure. I think there are a few things that we're looking at. I mean, there's certainly the question of how do we deliver basic city services better? How do we help the road system be safer and more equitable? Can we use some of this technology to better prioritize public transit over private vehicles, for example? Can we find ways to change how we permit and develop housing to support our goals of economic opportunity? Many people are burdened by transport costs, for example, as it relates to where they live versus where they work. So I think it does get back to this question of what do our constituents need from us in government. But there are also opportunities for us to look inward at the things that we do and say, can we deliver this service better or take a very finite resource and get more value out of it? So an example of this, we're doing a predictive modeling project around opioid overdoses, so looking at when people are transported by our ambulance system. We're analyzing the database of transports to try to understand whether we can predict the likelihood that a person who we might pick up on a given day will be back in an ambulance at some point within the next year. We have very limited resources when it comes to addiction services and recovery services. We want to make sure we're targeting those resources to the people who will get the most benefit out of it. So this idea that we can use data, that we can use new sources of information, that we can text mine ambulance records to help us make sure that a service like that is given to the people who will get the most benefit. I think that's a new capability and something that really hopefully will allow us to have a bigger impact with this limited resource we have available to us.
And what's your perspective, Deborah?
Yeah, I mean, we have very real, our own unique challenges and problems in Belfast. For example, we have 35% of kids leaving school without any GCSEs. So we want to look at technology and how technology can help with that particular problem. We have very high levels of respiratory disease in the city, and that's all linked to, of course, issues in relation to air quality. And of course that's all linked to congestion and transport issues. So we have a whole range of issues and problems that we want to address by using technology. And we know there's a lot of great work going on across all of the different sectors, in particular the digital sector in Belfast. But what we want to do is to be able to collaborate more, and as has already been mentioned, to work across the silos so that we can work together on common outcomes and try and work on the problems that really directly affect our city.
Okay, and I think it's fair to say that Belfast and Boston are two very different cities in terms of scale, in terms of social makeup, etc. I mean, is there any concept of a one-size-fits-all smart city technology platform? I'm looking at you, Dave.
Of course. When I listen to this, I always start, when that question gets presented, I always go back to why do we need these platforms? And they do link in a lot of comments already made. And just to add to the previous comment, that we know that there are specific needs in every city, and they tend to be very universal. They tend to be around urban environments, traffic, quality of life, etc., energy consumption, sustainability, etc., etc. What differs from city to city is the context, it's the individual context, but the problems tend to be quite, sort of common across all of them. And I think that's clearly understanding the clear needs, but there's another element of this, and this is just surprises. It's the insight, because if we start gathering all of this data, all of a sudden I think we will be surprised about some of the insight and some of the correlations that we do actually see. It's that whole idea of understanding the cause and consequences once you have the gathered data over a long period and you have that kind of statistical validation of what's happening there. And which brings me to the point of why do we need these city platforms? I always say it's about three things, and I'd run a risk of doing a Spanish Inquisition joke and then going to fifth and sixth one. But the three I always stick with is, first one is about, a lot of this is about how councils and cities engage with their citizens. And if each service, if each department is about these silos, if they all operate in their own manner, in their own way, including the data, then what are the chances of getting that consistency of use of citizen experience and interaction with the city? Of accountability, of democratic process, of transparency of how things are done. Platforms enable that. The second point is these insights across all sets of data. Perhaps in the room there are people here who are involved in the recent, this is a UK specific thing, there was a competition run by Innovate UK around creating demonstrator cities. And I think there were 20 odd proposals, and pretty much most of them, vast majority of them went, well, we have a huge problem with respiratory disease, which is caused by air pollution. Air pollution is caused by traffic congestion. What do we do about traffic? That's 4 silos. So it's just that one use case you have to cut across 4 silos. So again, if you have that horizontal platform, it makes it easier, it makes it quicker, it's sort of drawing business. And finally, point number 3, why I think this is important. And purely it's a cost issue. If each one of these silos build its own technology stack, starting from sensors into the data ingestion, into the analytics, and then presentation visualization, multiplication of platforms and multiplication of cost, and all kind of issues of maintaining that. So that's why we need them. How we build them, I think it's the art of the architecture. It's how do you bring, it's not about open systems. I think from my point of view, I think it has to be an open system. It has to be an open art architecture. It's how do you architect these different components, as long as there's that kind of a unifying set. And I think my colleagues spoke about our European initiative behind this, which is around 5 there, but it's kind of defining that common architecture in which you then can bring different components depending on different local contexts. And there you go. That's a big answer.
That's excellent. And it kind of proves a particular point with me, which is, you know, there is a need for open standards, or there's a need for standards. We'll get to the open bit in a second. Because if you don't have the standards, then you're effectively building a complete set of applications for each individual city separately. It's almost like, you know, somebody's building an app for me, then they're building an app for you. Do the standards exist? I mean, have you seen them in the field, Yasha?
They exist for some things, and I think it's a fascinating kind of chicken and egg question around, do you start with data standards or do you start with applications and then build data standards into them? I think probably, you know, one of the most successful areas of data standards is something called GTFS, which is the data standard format for transit systems to publish their schedule information. And this was something that, you know, to get to that kind of chicken and egg question, it was developed in combination between a transit agency in Oregon and Google, who was trying to build transit routing into their mapping application. And so they collaborated to create a standard that immediately allowed transit directions to scale from one agency to now a worldwide, not only worldwide directions in Google, but a worldwide ecosystem of applications, things like City Mapper, that allow you to take advantage of this common set of data across different municipalities and to make those applications portable from one place to the next. You know, I think in my mind, there's a role for government to be supportive of standards, but not necessarily to wait for them to exist in order to release data. If we handed everything over to ISO, we'd all have our open data portals in 2030, and the world will have moved on by then. So, you know, this idea of, can we start by releasing data? Can we engage with customers? Can we identify pockets where there seems to be interest in building something that is portable and then work collectively to develop standards? 2 areas that I'm seeing this happen. One is around data related to building and land use. There's something called BLDS, the Building and Land Use Development Specification, And basically, it's a shared data standard for talking about what a parcel of land looks like, what a permit looks like, what kind of structures exist on that land. And you can imagine that that kind of data, if it was portable and if you could write an application that worked from one jurisdiction to the next, there's a lot of interesting things that you could do for businesses, from an analytical and research perspective. Another area that I think is ripe for this, especially in the advent of smarter cars and transportation systems, is parking. There are, to my knowledge, no real established data standards for defining what the regulations are for the use of a bit of curb space. Are you allowed to park here? What times? What are the rules? Are there meters? There's no data standard for saying, here's how many parking spaces are available in this car park, or here's how this stretch of street has this many spaces available and at this rate right now. So you start to think about a navigation app that, instead of just taking you to the destination, it could, with data standards, take you to the parking space at the destination, or closest to the destination, and let you know what it's going to cost you to park there when you get there. Maybe even give you a choice about a more convenient but more expensive option. And possibly even incentivize you to take public transit instead, because you look at that and you realize actually driving is 20 minutes longer than it looks like, because I'm going to have to park and walk. I may as well just get on the bus. So those are a couple areas where I think these standards can and should emerge. But ultimately, government has a role to be a partner in the development of these standards and to come together with applications that are being developed. But I don't think we can wait for standards first.
Okay. And what's been your experience of the standards landscape, Cormac, and the work you've been doing?
We've taken the approach to try to enforce a certain standard, even in terms of data release. They have to be in open formats. You know, an XLS requires a Microsoft Office license, so CSV or text to take away that license limitation. TransLink are looking at releasing the Metro and GTFS as well. So we're really trying to push clean, machine readable, and it's an absolute requirement that it has to be in an open format before it's published on the site.
Okay.
That's an education process to the publishers. What is a CSV? You know, what is, in some instances, if you're not working with an IT section, if you're working with a business area, what is machine readability? You know, there's copious Excel spreadsheets out there with inserted rows that, you know, machine readability is impossible as a consequence. Commas where there shouldn't be commas, trying to get that clean, and then that makes it easy for the applications to read this information. So if we can get that right, then the next stage is that much easier.
So we talked a little bit about the citizen perspective. You know, what about, you know, what's in it for the city itself? I mean, what benefits would you expect to get from a smart city environment, Deborah, you know, in terms of operational efficiencies and things like that?
Okay, well, I think we need to think of the citizen in terms of the citizen as a tourist, citizen as a business owner, as someone who lives in the city, or as someone who works in the city. And of course, you know, in all of those different roles, there will be you know, various different benefits from the smart approach. But a lot of it's about what is the experience, for example, of a tourist coming to our city. We have tens of thousands of visitors coming to Belfast, coming off the cruise ships here, and what happens whenever they land on our shores. So how do we serve up that tourist offering to them? For people who are living in our city, you know, how do we ensure that, for example, the poor and the vulnerable in our city have equal access to employment opportunities, to healthcare, and you know, how can we ensure that they can not only survive but thrive in our city? And that's what we're looking to technology to do, to come up with the solutions around those particular problems. But one of the other areas is, of course, how do we deliver low cost but value for money quality public services? And what often seems to happen is that when citizens avail of public services, there are various different parts of the service that are carried out across various different departments, either within one organisation or sometimes across several organisations. Maybe that would be between local government and central government. So how can we consolidate those processes, and somehow in the background, how can we ensure that to the citizen they're just interacting with a government service, and that it's of no consequence to them as to which government department is actually carrying out that service. So how can we empower citizens to avail of services when they want the service, from where they want it, and in a way, in a manner that they want to use and consume that particular service. And how can we empower them to do that? And that really then would reduce as well the back office, the burden on the back office and the intense resource that we need to deploy on delivering services. I suppose channel shift is a huge part of that, and pushing apps such as Report It, Request It, and so on onto our smartphones or online.
And that's a common challenge we're seeing across organisations, whether they're cities or not, but technology is not going to solve that silo problem. It might be a means which you can implement a solution. So are you doing anything in terms of organisational change management?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I suppose one of the points that maybe I want to get across today is that the smart city approach should be about taking a strategic approach. And while we have all of these fantastic smart city projects happening in the different vertical markets, we need to look at cross-silo, cross-departments, cross-agencies, cross-sector, and start partnering more with the private sector, voluntary sector, and other sectors, business community obviously as well. And one of the key things that we want to do in terms of the smart city approach is to set out a smart city roadmap for Belfast. And that will be a roadmap that will include mechanisms for collaboration across the city. But the key thing about the roadmap will be, rather than technology for technology's sake, or because this is a nice project or a nice thing to have in your city, that the projects will be implemented to underpin and take forward the vision that Belfast has for the sort of city it wants to be in 2030, 2050. And also that we can collaborate on problems in the city that will stop us from achieving those particular ambitions. So I think collaboration using existing networks and mechanisms, and we collaborate and engage rather quite significantly with our citizen, and have been doing that for the past year to help to develop the vision for Belfast. So we want to tap into and use those particular networks and engagement mechanisms. But we also want to look at maybe how technology can help us to collaborate more on technology outcomes and technology solutions.
Well, this feels like one of those conversations that could just flow naturally for the next hour, but Colin's probably going to give me the stink eye shortly. Has anybody on the floor got any questions for the panel? No? One question. Wesley at the back. Is a mic coming, I think? That's Connor's exercise. I actually know you're a marathoner, aren't you, Connor?
Tom, hi. My name is Wesley Emmett. I work for the Strategic Investment Board. I'm just wondering how we could manufacture an interest in our friend from Boston coming to work here. How much would he cost? Well, perhaps we could talk about that afterwards.
I'm very flattered.
As a serious point, though, I wonder when Belfast will be ready to make that sort of investment.
So that's the sort of thing that we are actually talking about at the moment. Do we need some sort of a commissioner for Belfast? We don't see a smart city approach as separate to the other strategies that are in place in the city and that we're trying to develop for the city. So one of the discussions that we're currently having with senior management in the council is around some sort of a digital commissioner or chief information officer. How do we pull all of the strands together? And very much that's on the agenda.
I would just add, if I think about my role and what I've been tasked with doing, the idea in 2016, there should be nothing that a government is doing that doesn't involve technology in some way. I mean, you look at the way the private sector works, every service, every product, every program has a digital component to it. And I think the shift that I'm very fortunate has happened in Boston and has allowed me to do the things that I'm doing in my role, is that recognition has come to the city that we need to have people who understand digital, who have that seat at the table with all of the other departments as they think about their goals and their priorities and larger plans, so that technology is not an afterthought. It's not okay, here's the policy, we're moving, can you build a website for this? But rather it's how do we leverage technology from the outset in planning, in research, in the citizen experience, in measuring outcomes from the thing we're going to do, and when that's baked in from the beginning, when it's strategic, it can have a tremendous impact. So I think that notion of not thinking about this as being truly separate from everything else you're doing is exactly right, and hopefully you can have technology leadership in the city that can work with all of those other parts of the organization.
And if I may just add to that very quickly, investment into this is essential, of course. The programs need to be funded and the results need to be created. So that element of kind of a business acumen around creating all this is important. But within that, you always need to recognize what are the assets already in place. And based on my company's experience working with other cities around the UK and the rest of the world, and comparing to Belfast, I think there are amazing assets here already. Data is coming together. That whole kind of open data structure and power, sourcing the data, it's taking shape. That's essential. But then you look at what's the next thing, and I think this conference here is a testimony to it. There's a fabulous technical community here that can actually get involved with this and accelerate many of these programs if the structures are right, if the collaborative networks are set right. Two universities are not, great universities here is not to be underestimated, because that allows for that innovation engine within the context of a city. So there's a lot to go for, I think, in Belfast around smart cities. So,
Can I just make a final comment?
Okay.
Tom, but just saying, Belfast is at a really exciting time in its history, and under the new powers of civic leadership, Belfast City Council have been leading on the development of a vision for Belfast, as I said earlier. At the same time, we're now starting to develop our local development plan, and that's the physical plan for the city that's going to also support the vision for the city. We have a fibre network that is the envy of the rest of the UK. We have an e-car infrastructure that is the envy of Europe with 40 rapid charging points. So we have so much already here and so much happening. We're starting to look at pre-procurement and pre-commercial models of procurement. And this year alone, we're probably going to go out with 3 SBRI type projects to engage SMEs to come and work with us on our problems, and where we will help to develop their solutions to prototype stage. So there's a lot happening, and we're very excited about this whole concept and about the opportunity that unlocking technology and opening up data can bring to the city.
So thanks, Deborah, and thanks, panel. I guess I'll make the final comment on this. As part of the technology community in Northern Ireland, I really want Belfast to be seen as the most digital, smartest, most connected city in the world. As a citizen, I kind of don't care about any of that. I mean, I want to have the most frictionless interaction with the city possible, whether it's parking, whether it's travel, whether it's healthcare. So I guess there's an execution and a usability challenge there for you, Deborah. Okay, thank you very much.